Hello and welcome to another weekly session with C Admissions on the MBA application journey. I am excited to be here with you today, especially I know that a lot of you are going through application submission for round one, and if you are targeting some of the M7's top 10 that do require video components for the application submission, then this is an excellent time for you to start thinking about preparing for how you're going to answer those video submissions. So before we get started on today's presentation, I just want to invite you to essentially engage with me in this session as I'm presenting the various pieces that I have put together for today's live. And write the questions wherever you're joining us from. So we are on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Instagram. I don't know if I said that. So I would love to hear the questions that you have as we're going through the presentation. This way I can stop and engage really with that question so I can really give you the insights that you need, particularly in areas that you are not entirely sure how to handle or how to tackle. So also, if you are not subscribed to our YouTube channel, please subscribe. You'll be notified of all our future events, and share it with other people in your network who are also going through the MBA application journey and may find this information helpful, whether they're applying this round or next round. And then next week, we're actually moving in the applicants next round category. So we're going through the applicants who are preparing for round 2 applications. So if you are one of those applicants, please join us next week at 10, where we're going to talk about how to customize your MBA application to meet the school's needs while still, using your own stories that you have that are your greatest stories in your applications across schools. So with that, why don't we get started in today's discussion? So for those of you who don't know me, I am the founder of SIA Admissions, and what we do here at SIA is support applicants in telling their story. We help you present your story in a way that really captures the attention of the admission team. And we do this by going in deep dives and brainstorming and really asking you the right questions to gather the right insights and help you think about your experiences from a different perspective that you may be accustomed to. One of the things that I always say is that we are not taught how to market ourselves. We're taught about doing a lot of different things, but not marketing ourselves. So part of this journey is really helping you navigate your experiences and be able to present them in a way that makes sense for business school and business school admissions. So if you are considering working with someone as a coach to guide you through this process, I definitely encourage you to reach out. It's no obligation. And schedule a call with me to discuss how we at SIA Admissions support MBA applicants in a very customized way to their own needs. So from that, let's talk about today's agenda. So we're going to talk about the type of video essays, and there are 3, the preparation process, and then obviously we have the Q&A at the end. I see that a few other people joined since I made the announcement. Please write your questions in the comments in whatever platform you're joining us from. I really want to be able to stop where I'm in the presentation and just engage with you and answer questions. So I genuinely encourage you to do that in whichever platform you're joining us from. Write your question and I will have them on my other screen. So I'll be looking on the side just so you know why I'm looking on the side. So let's dive right in. So the types of video essays that you can have is a pre-recorded video. So MIT and Berkeley Haas have pre-recorded videos, which means that you are essentially given a prompt. You answer the prompt in the pre-recorded video that you attach to your application. Then there's a Kira Talent or a version of a Kira Talent video recording where you don't actually have you don't know exactly what questions you're personally going to get. They are randomly generated, and you will get a question on the screen and you have to come up with an answer within a 20-second or 30-second window. Then there is the video interview that's an alternative to one-on-one. This currently only McCombs has this option, and this is really, you have to treat this video interview as the real deal, as you need to prepare essentially as you would for the MBA one-on-one interviews. You have more questions in this one, although it does follow the traditional MBA interview, that is some interview questions that is similar to the Kira Talent questions as well, but obviously you have more, and they're wanting to get to know you in more details. All right. Oops. Just checking to make sure there's no comments. Okay. So the schools that have video interviews, I'm going to go through several of them, not only in M7 and top 10, just so you are aware, if you weren't aware until now, that these schools will have the video components associated with it. So that is, of course, MIT. Kellogg has a video essay that is using Kira Talent. MIT has two actually video essays. One is a prompt that you get in advance, and one is, which is a pre-recording, and one is a randomly generated question that you get after you submit your application. There is Yale SOM that has a set of questions that you will be responding to, as does Foster, Emory, Owen, and McCombs, as I mentioned so far. So these are schools that if you have on your list of schools that you are applying to, you want to pay attention to the segment associated to those schools in terms of the preparation process. So let's start with the pre-recorded question. This may seem very straightforward, but I can assure you it's not. But the first thing that you have to do is to understand the prompt and then pay attention to the clues. The admission team is actually giving you quite a bit of clues in the way they're framing the question, the way they're giving you the prompt. So for example, MIT Sloan has the prompt that asks you to introduce yourself to your future classmates. You may think, okay, this is an introduction kind of a video response. You have 1 minute to respond, which may seem very straightforward. However, they're also giving you a few clues in terms of how you need to think about this question. They're asking you to think about it as if you are presenting to your future classmates, which means this doesn't need to be formal in the from the perspective of how you would prepare and how you would put this forward. If it said, introduce yourself to the admission committee, it would be a different tone that you would bring to the presentation of your video. Whereas your peers, this is a little bit less formal, more casual in delivery of the content. Now you also have to think about, what do your peers care about? What do they like as you prepare to answer this question? I do encourage applicants to write bullet points or scripts if you are a really nervous video. If you're really nervous in terms of like the video element. I remember before I did my YouTube lives, I saw a camera and I was a deer in the headlights, and that's something that I had to overcome over time. And you don't have that luxury at the moment. So whatever element helps you the most. However, what's important is that you do not sound scripted. You don't sound like a robot. You do have to bring personality to the video response, and recognize that this may take a little bit of time of practice. Not just what are you going to say, but how are you going to say it, and be comfortable to capture everything that you want to say in 60 seconds. For MIT specifically, they do ask you to do a one take. This is not you're not stitching and cutting and doing all sorts of editing with your video. It's a one take kind of video. You can record it multiple times, but it's a one take, meaning there's no editing allowed essentially for this. So you have to capture everything in 60 seconds, which unless you're accustomed to recording 60-second videos, you'll realize very quickly how little time you have to say what you want to say. I do encourage you to record it in advance of the due date of the application. Obviously, you have your script, you have what you want to say, but also it's about how you say it, right? If you are looking at the camera and being very serious and not really showing any kind of personality, well, you're telling the admission team, this is how I show up in front of my peers. And that may not be a welcoming kind of video. So you do need to make sure that you're paying attention also to your body language and background. If it's very distracting, look at what you have in the background, how those things can be interpreted as well. And also look at the quality of your videos, right? Because you can retake the video, quality of the audio rather, because you can retake it, make sure that you have the right audio equipment necessary for you to record effectively. And for the admission committee, when they play back your video, they can actually hear you and what you're saying. Right. The Cura Talent, this is one of the more challenging parts of the MBA application submission. You typically get about 3 questions, and you don't really know what those questions are. Most of the time is a get to know you kind of questions or your motivations question. You do want to have responses to that. It's very important in how you introduce yourself. These are also 60-second videos. So you want to have a pre-prepared response on introduce yourself beyond your resume. What are your motivations to attend X school, right? The school's expectation is that you know why you're applying, right? And the one thing I always say is that when you have a timer in front of you, at least this happens for me, when I'm being timed, I panic, right? And when you panic, then you are not necessarily thinking clearly. So without having these questions thought out in advance of your actual video essay response, you risk not being able to fully respond to the question with the level of detail that you want, because you have put a lot of effort into your application, and you want to show the same level of effort in your video response too. They do this in terms of not giving you questions in advance because they want to see how you think on your feet, but that doesn't mean that you go in unprepared, right? You will have also behavior questions. So think about behavior questions that you get in MBA interviews, like the one-on-one interviews, which is like, tell me about a time you had a difficult conversation or something along those lines. It allows them to see how you think about your experiences. And then in some cases, like Yale SOM also has a case question. This is about your opinion on something. It's not about what's right or wrong. It's really about how do you think? How do you take a stance essentially on something? Yale SOM does have the raw cases. So schools that have case method, you have to, it's debate in a way. So can you take a stance, and how do you develop your arguments in your responses? So you want to prepare for these as well. Even if you don't get the same question that you prepared, knowing what you need to respond, how you need to respond to those questions is going to be really important too. I do have a second slide for Cura Talent because this one requires quite a bit. So the preparation process for these behavior type questions, right? Because I talked about the introduce yourself and your motivation. So your motivation is like, why are you applying to the school? Why do you want to attend X institution? And that involves your goals and knowing how to answer those questions in a 60-second response. Excuse me. And the behavior questions, think about like challenges with a team. You want to build a repository of examples, even if you don't know exactly what the question is going to be that is going to show up on the screen, right? You get a random question that just shows up. You have 20 seconds to think about what you're going to say, and then 60 seconds to respond. So you want to have a repository of challenges with teams, challenges in work. And this is not only one example, but you put together your best examples that you have. The one thing I will say for the video recording component, do make sure that you are not repeating what you have in your application, because this is responses that the admission committee is going to look at in addition to reading your application. So if you are using the same examples, you're not really putting your best foot forward in terms of like you're giving them a sense of who you are in varying different contexts. Look at any kinds of business process improvements that you have done in the environments that you have been in. What kind of impact? And these are not mutually exclusive, obviously, because impact can come from all sorts of angles. You can have an impact in the challenge that you face with the team, impact in the process of improvements, but do remember that part of the response must demonstrate your impact that you've had. So whatever the example, repository of example you have prepared, you must also think about what's the impact, what's the result, what's the impact that this work had in the organization or in the team, depending on the context of the example. You also want to have examples that illustrate your professional growth. And what I mean by that is times when you were challenged, times when you were asked to move out of your comfort zone to be able to solve whatever problem you're faced with. So think through your experiences and put together some examples. You want to use the CAR or STAR, context, action, result, or situation, task, action, result method in responding to these questions. But remember, you have a short amount of time, so you don't have an essay response, right? This is really a 1-minute response that you must be able to capture your experience in. So when you identify the examples, do also have a angle in which you're taking the examples and be able to fit that example in a 60-second response. And then you also want to do mocks. It's really important that you are practicing the delivery. So when you have identified the examples, practice, put some questions together, ask friends. If you're working obviously with someone, you're going to be with a coach. That's part of their responsibility, is to coach you on this process, and do mocks with you. So have those mocks be timed, right? You want a stopwatch on your screen to see how you're doing with time delivery. I always say try to deliver in less than a minute when you are in a very comfortable space. And if something happens during the interview, during the video recording, you have that 5-second buffer that allows you to course correct in case something goes awry. And then finally, let's talk about the video interview. And this is the in replacement or replacing the actual interview. And this is one that McCombs has announced last year that they were going to initiate. And it's essentially in an attempt to remove bias in the interview process. So you are going to be asked about 4 questions. They do follow the same format as an actual MBA interview, with behavior questions, with motivation questions. So you want to prepare for this. Typically, once you submit your application, you will get a link afterwards to record your session, and you have 1 week to respond to the video. Prepare like you would for an interview. Use the same repository of examples, add additional examples to your list of things that you can use in order to answer these questions, and mock as well your responses within the context of the time frame that they give you, and recognize that you have a week. You don't have forever to complete this video. You must submit it within that time frame and be able to plan around what that's going to look like for you. So with that, I'm going to move to questions. We have received a few questions that came in through the registration, so we're going to start with those. I'm going to stop sharing screens, but I want to give you an opportunity that if you want to contact us for support in your application, especially if you are applying in later rounds, definitely reach out for a consultation to discuss how we here at C Admissions can help you on this journey. So let me stop sharing screens and moving this. All right. Sorry. All right, so we can get started with questions. So the first question is, what are the contents that I should cover in the video essay? This is an excellent question. And the content is dependent on the question. So one thing that I'll say is make sure that you fully understand the question and all of its parts. Oftentimes a question has multiple parts and you want to make sure that you're answering all of its parts. Pay attention to the question. Sometimes I see applicants take the question and think about the example and present the response, not in answering the question, but given a response of what they would like to answer. This is not that kind of interview. This kind of video, you really must pay attention to the question and be sure that you are answering it with full detail. So if it's a behavior question, make sure that your responses are going to have the context of the problem that you were dealing with. So if it was, a challenging work environment, why was it? What was the context that made it challenging? And then because it was a challenge, because it was affecting the team, what did you do to take action in that in remediating that experience for everyone involved? And then you're going to go into any kind of details around those actions. Obviously you have 60 seconds, so it's not a lot of details that you can go into, but the macro level details that you have to take action on. And then the results of that experience. So how did the work that you did, how did it support the team dynamic? And anytime that there is a challenge, even though it's not part of the question, what makes a question move from good to great is when you're able to talk about a lesson learned. So anytime we have conflict, anytime we have a challenge, it's not just about solving the challenge. It's also about making sure that we're using that challenge as an opportunity to learn for the future. So in the conflict resolution kind of environment, what actions, how did that environment, that experience influence your thinking, essentially? And what was the lesson learned that you gained from that experience itself? So in context, wrapping that up is to say, make sure that you're giving enough detail without going into too much detail, because you have 60 seconds. And when you start practicing deliveries of responses, 1 minute response is not a lot of time. So you kind of want to move quickly with touching all those points. What is the best way to introduce yourself in the video? The introduction is always a little bit challenging because we're used to saying, "Hi, my name is Susan," and what do you do? But an introduction that is really good is when you're able to say something more than what you have said in the rest of your application. So you do want to look at your application as a foundational piece that the admission committee already has in front of them. And then introduce yourself with additional context. So think about what makes you you. That's not going to be on your resume, for example. So on your resume, you're not going to talk about what matters to you, what values you hold. So that is one way that you can talk about, like in terms of introducing yourself, and then going into a little bit of detail and maybe one example of how you exemplify that. How do you illustrate your character in the communities in the most broadest sense? How do you exemplify the character in those communities? So communities, when I say communities in the broadest sense, what I mean by that is your work, colleagues is one community. Your volunteer projects that you're a part of is another community. Your friends is another community, but I don't think you want to be including your friends in your MBA introduction video. So just focus on work environment as well as the community service kind of environment. Excellent. Next question. What is the ideal length of a video submission to keep it engaging yet comprehensive? The length is 60 seconds. Yale has one of the questions, the behavior questions, give you 90 seconds. So you have a little bit more space to give a bit more detail in that response, but it's essentially 60 seconds. So you really want to make sure that you cover all the parts in that 60 seconds. It's not necessarily about going into details and thinking about the nuances of the language that you're choosing. Obviously, you want to have detailed language, but it's really important to be clear, to be concise, and be able to answer fully all parts of the question within that time frame that you are given. In the platform that you are for, specifically for the video, for the Kira talent type of video essays, you will have a timer on the screen, a countdown essentially from that is going to be ticking, and you are going to be watching that as you are giving responses. So it's going to be important to have these responses prepared well in advance, or this repository prepared well in advance, structured in that particular way using the CAR method, that will allow you to lessen your anxiety, right? It will lessen your anxiety as you are seeing that time, tick down until you have 0 seconds left, right? And once you get to 0, even if you didn't finish what you were saying, the video recording will cut off. So you will have only 1 minute to respond, or 90 seconds to respond, right? All right, last question. What common mistakes applicants make in video submission that you've seen in the past so I can avoid them? Yes. Showing up unprepared, thinking that you have the answers because you have written your application. That is a huge error in applicants' mindset if you approach this video interview that way. Even in a question of, why do you want to attend X school? What you have written in your application is not enough. You're going to add more to the context of this particular essay response, video essay response. So, go prepared, go fully prepared. The other thing that I see, and I mentioned earlier also, is that applicants don't answer fully the question, or assume that the question is going in one direction, so they read part of the question and not the full question, and therefore miss out on fully answering. The admission team is looking to see, are you paying attention? And being fully present is going to be really important. Read the question. I know the timer is coming down. So by practicing in advance, you're going to lessen that, or help yourself lessen the anxiety. But make sure that you have all parts of the question. If you need to use that 20 seconds to jot down the question in a notepad, do so that you can remember as you're giving your response. You can look around. Sometimes I see applicants make the mistake of thinking that you have to just stare at the camera and like you're talking to the admission team. Well, you're human, and if that's something that only adds anxiety to you, if you need to look to the right or to the left, at some point in the process, it's okay. Just don't be a shifty eye person who's looking, everywhere but the camera. So those are some of the things that you can definitely avoid, and making sure that you are being concise, answering fully the question, and that you're giving concrete, specific examples, singular examples. Avoid giving generalities or going into theories or going into, a person would do something like this. That's not what they're asking. They're really asking about your own experiences. So keep it personal in this response. Excellent. So we are at time. Thank you for watching, and join us next week. We're going to talk about how you put together applications that are customized to each school while keeping authenticity in terms of putting together your best examples that make you shine, essentially, for these schools. So join us then. The registration is on the link on the screen, as well as if you go to our website on our event page, cadmissions.com, you can see the events. We'll be adding more events to that page, so keep an eye out as well. Thank you again, and I will see you next week.